and served in the Israel Defense Forces. Mr. Spear has spoken on numerous live radio and television audiences in defense of Israel. He currently divides his time between Scottsdale and Netanya, Israel. Devin Spear is the author of a blog on the Times of Israel and the book The Future of Israel, winner of the 2005 Galip Award. You can review all of his articles, interviews, and debates at www.devinspear.com. That's spelled DEVINSPER.com. And Devin, I will mention that The Future of Israel is a wonderful book. I appreciate it. And I'm going to give a free copy to anybody who calls with a real question on today's show. You can't just say your name. You got to call and ask a question during the show. And I'll get you a free copy of his book. You'll be able to pick it up at my office. Okay, Devin, let's get started. In a recent interview with an Israeli journalist, former President Trump said, quote, "The Jewish people in the United States either don't like Israel or don't care about Israel. There's people in this country that are Jewish no longer love Israel." So Trump was highly criticized by some Jewish groups for saying this. What do you think of Trump's statement?
I think Trump is simply drawing the only logical conclusion you can draw from the fact that the majority of American Jews today will not even bother to vote in the Israeli and the Jewish interest. For example, they continue to support politicians like President Obama, whose policies were hostile to Israel and detrimental to Israel. They continue to vote for Democratic members of Congress who, for example, boycotted former Prime Minister Netanyahu's speech when he appeared before the Congress at the invitation of the Speaker of the House. And despite that, 80% of the Jews continue to vote for the Democratic Party. They latch on to causes of the moment, even anti-Semitic causes like BLM and BDS, which are not their own and in which they're not welcome. And they meekly go along with the woke mob's demonization of Israel rather than stand up for Israel's just cause. And I think that's what President Trump was referring to.
It's interesting. When I knew you were going to be on the show with this topic, I called some people I grew up with. Just by way of background, I went to a public school in the north side of Chicago, but believe it or not, my grade school was 100% Jewish. And this is a public school because this was a neighborhood that was created after World War II. And I've been in touch with about 3 or 4 of these people ever since. So you're talking about, 70 years, basically, almost 70 years. And
was that Skokie?
No, that's not Chicago. I went to Solomon School in the north side of Chicago, just south of Lincolnwood.
Okay.
Skokie also was created basically after World War II. That was a lot of Holocaust survivors in Skokie. Right. But these were new homes basically in the north side of Chicago. And like I said, the grammar school was about 100% Jewish. The high school was about 70% Jewish because there were obviously many different feeder schools into the high school. But I called some of the friends just to talk to them about it. And they've never been to Israel. They seem to have no interest in visiting Israel. And to them, it's just kind of something that's not even in their thought process. You know, they know about Israel, obviously. They know some of the history, very little. They know it was created, reborn, basically following World War II. But they really had no interest. And I didn't want to be critical of them because I told them when I first started talking to them, I don't want to be critical. I just want to get some ideas to discuss on the show. So I appreciate the fact that Danny, Steve, and Ron talked to me about this. So anyway, I appreciate the fact that you're here to talk about this, Devin.
Thank you.
Other than voting patterns, are there other reasons to believe that Trump is right and that American Jews no longer care about Israel?
There are many American Jews who are like those you just described, Bill, who are apathetic to Israel. Or let's put it this way. They will say they care about Israel, but it's not their top priority. And that's why they will vote for politicians who are anti-Israel. That may even bother them, but they have so many priorities above Israel. But actually, there are more and more Jews who are openly hostile to Israel. And we see this in the polls. For example, during the recent Operation Guardian of the Walls, in which Israel is defending itself from Hamas, some American Jews participated in Palestinian-sponsored demonstrations condemning Israel for defending her cities against Hamas's unprovoked rocket attacks. Now, a subsequent poll found that 25% of American Jews consider Israel an apartheid state. 22% believe Israel is committing genocide. And 20% of those under 40 accept the blatantly anti-Semitic idea that Israel does not have the right to exist. So, obviously, these are the Jews who Trump was talking about, and it is not all Jews by any means, but there is a minority on the left of American Jews who not only are apathetic, but who do not support Israel and oppose Israel.
You know, it's interesting, Devin, there are a lot of things interesting, but I still don't understand how these so-called liberal Jews, or anybody else who's liberal, can support basically Muslims against Israel. The Muslims who will throw gays off tall buildings or hang them, the way they treat women. The only place in the Middle East, basically, where you can have a gay rights parade is Israel, and they do have one every year, and nobody bothers these people. Try to have a gay rights parade in Tehran, in Amman, Jordan, or Syria. You'll find out what happens. Israel is the only place where gays and women are treated fairly, yet these so-called liberal people, they're anti-Israel. I just don't get it. Do you have any response to that?
Yeah, it's not a thought-out philosophy. It's simply going along with the woke mob. So the Palestinian propaganda has penetrated the woke American left, and they regurgitate Palestinian slogans and don't even realize what they're saying. When they say a slogan like, "From the river to the sea, Palestine shall be free," they're talking about genocide against the people of Israel. But people mouthing these slogans don't know what they're saying. And this is just a shallow, hollow thing that's the flavor of the moment. So they've latched onto it, and rather than defending Israel's just cause.
Devin, I've read that the same poll also shows that the majority of American Jews do support Israel's right to exist. Do you take this as a positive sign? It just seems inconsistent with what you were saying earlier.
Yes, the majority will say that they support Israel's right to exist. I said it's a minority that doesn't. But as my father used to say, that and a nickel will buy you a newspaper. Everyone except for stone-cold anti-Semites and anti-Zionists will say they support Israel's right to exist. Imagine if Israelis were to say that they support America's right to exist. Such a statement is meaningless and it's condescending. Israel doesn't need anyone's permission to exist any more than the United States needs anyone's permission to exist. Not to recognize Israel's existence, as a lot of Arab states previously did, is simply to deny reality. And not to recognize Israel's right to exist is just an anti-Semitic double standard towards the Jewish state. In other words, we say we recognize the inherent right of every people to sovereignty and to self-determination, except the Jews in the Jewish state. So while many American Jews say they, quote, support Israel's right to exist, unquote, that doesn't mean anything because in practical terms, they do nothing meaning to support her. They won't even vote for politicians who support her. So the statement is hollow and meaningless.
You think that the so-called liberal position or the lefty position, like for abortion rights and for women's rights, do you think that trumps, shall I use the word trumps, reality or what they logically should support?
Sorry, I don't understand the question.
Okay, you have people on the left who are very much, for abortion rights.
Yes.
They're very much, for women's rights, but they support these different causes that really are against what they're supporting. I don't understand that.
There's no, as I said, it's not a thought-out philosophy. It's not a well-thought-out philosophy. The old left, while their premise was wrong, had an intelligent philosophy based on Marx's writings in which they believed that all struggle was class struggle and everything flowed from that. And they could make intelligent economic arguments if you bought their premise. They were wrong, but they were intelligent arguments. The woke left is simply ignorance. I'm sorry to say that. It's simply what they used to call about the right in the 1920s, a know-nothing movement. A movement of people who mouth slogans, but who can't support them in 5 minutes of rational debate, which is why they won't debate, which is why they get hysterical and emotional when you try to talk about facts. They believe in certain things because it's the popular in thing to believe, and they can't support them.
Well, I think perhaps education is in order here. I don't know how you're going to educate these people as to reality, but to me, it's just so obvious what happens to the causes that they have. The way they treat gays in the Middle East, the way they treat women. I would think that education of these left-wing people, including the Jews, might go a long way to hopefully getting them to understand that they are just dead wrong about their opinions. I don't know how you can educate them. Unfortunately, we have to go to a break, and we can take your response after we get back. You're listening to Middle East Radio Forum here on 960 The Patriot. My name is William Wolf. I'm your host today. Mayor Jolovitz will be with you next Sunday. My guest is Devin Spear, and I very much like the book he wrote, The Future of Israel. And as I said, I will give a copy to anybody who calls in and asks an intelligent question. You'll have to pick it up at my office, but that's in Central Phoenix, 7301 North 16th Street, Suite 203 in Phoenix. And I thank you very much for supporting the show. The best way to support the show, of course, is to use the services of the advertisers. I have to pay for the show each and every week. The only way I'm able to do that now in the 19th year is because I have great advertisers and great listeners who support those advertisers. But please remember, it's very, very important to tell the advertiser you're using their services because they advertise on this program. They need to know that their advertising dollars are well spent. Often it costs you nothing to support this show. What I mean by that is switch where you're spending money from somebody who does not advertise to somebody who does. You'll get great goods and services, and you'll be supporting Middle East Radio Forum. Of course, direct donations are welcome. You can send a check to me, William Wolf, at my office, 7301 North 16th Street, Suite 203, Phoenix 85020. That's 7301 North 16th Street, Suite 203, Phoenix 85020. Thanks for listening. We'll be right back with Devin Spear. Dassault and Macros are my business and personal CPAs for a good reason. Prompt and accurate work means I trust them with all my accounting needs. Conveniently located just off the 51 freeway at 3519 East Shea Boulevard, Suite 122, give them a call and see what they can do for you. 602-996-8885. That's Dassault and Macros, 602-996-8885. There are a lot of great Mexican restaurants in Phoenix, but I am very particular. When I want the best Mexican lunch or dinner, I head straight to Mi Patio on the southeast corner of 7th Avenue in Osborne. They serve all your favorite dishes and only use pure vegetable oil in their cooking. Mi Patio is sure to become your favorite Mexican restaurant too. That's Mi Patio Mexican Restaurant on the southeast corner of 7th Avenue in Osborne. Tell them that William Wolf sent you there. Watermark Wealth Strategies and Watermark Wealth Planning offices at 11333 North Scottsdale Road, Suite 295 in Scottsdale. Has been a loyal sponsor of this program since its start. They specialize in wealth retention, estate, and legacy planning. Watermark has been a leader in the Valley, and its members have been together for over 17 years. Founding partner Carmen Cercone has over 36 years of experience in tax, investment, and estate planning issues affecting retirees and their assets. They offer comprehensive planning that has helped assist families through the process of identifying client objectives and concerns and constructing a strategic plan to address tax, risk, and legacy issues. Consultations are complimentary, and we encourage you to contact Allison Porter at 480-442-3989 to schedule. Securities offered through Kestra Investment Services, LLC, member FINRA/SIPC. Investment advisory services offered through Kestra Advisory Services, LLC, an affiliate of Kestra Investment Services. Watermark Wealth Strategies, LLC is not affiliated with Kestra Investment Services or Kestra Advisory Services. How do you choose your accident injury attorney? If you need heart surgery, do you choose your surgeon from seeing an ad on TV or a billboard? Of course not. Choosing your attorney also should not be done so casually and without thought. I do not advertise on TV or billboards, but only on this radio show. I give all clients personal attention. Your phone calls are never intercepted by some untrained assistant. I take all calls if I am available or return calls at my earliest opportunity. I was named Trial Attorney of the Year by the Arizona Trial Lawyers Association 2 years ago and have 48 years of experience. So think about it and choose your accident attorney wisely. My number is 602-279-1914, and my office is located at 7301 North 16th Street, Suite 203 in Phoenix. I personally welcome your call. Again, 602-279-1914.
You're listening to the Middle East Radio Forum on 960 The Patriot. To join in the conversation, call anytime at 602-508-0960. That's 602-508-0960. Outside of the Valley, call toll-free 888-960-9696. Questions are also welcome at radioforum@aol.com. That's radioforum@aol.com. Now back to your host, Attorney William J. Wolf.
Welcome to today's edition of Middle East Radio Forum. This is the second segment I'm having with Devin Spear, terrific guest. He's a returning guest. I should have him on more often, actually. Let's start taking some questions. I want to make sure everybody who calls in or sends an email gets a chance to ask. Joe in Phoenix, go ahead. What's your question for Devin Spear?
Yes. Hi, Mr. Spear. If you don't mind, I'd like to play a little devil's advocate with my question. So here we go. Mr. Spear has stated in the previous segment that all people to self-determination. Why then does Israel consistently stand in the way of the self-determination of the indigenous Palestinian people? This question is sort of rooted in some discussions I've had with people on the other side, and so I figure be a good one, I think, maybe for Mr. Spear to hear, for me to hear what he says on that.
Okay, Joe, your question is like fingernails on a blackboard because the Palestinians are not the indigenous people of that area, but I'm going to let Devin answer the question because you directed it to him.
Yes, that was what I was going to say, that the Jews are the original native inhabitants of Israel. We're called Jews because we come from Judea, and the Arabs came with the Arab conquest in the 7th century. So the Jews are the original native inhabitants of Israel. Anyone can open a Bible and see that. All the towns in Israel, including the Arab towns, still bear their original Hebrew names: Hebron, Jerusalem, Akko, Haifa, and that's because they were founded by Jews and later conquered by Arabs and reconquered by the Jews. Secondly, the Palestinians are not a people so much as a political movement because there's no Palestinian language. They speak Arabic. They're not ethnically Palestinian. They're Arabs. They're no different than other Arabs. So it's questionable whether you need a 23rd Arab state, which is not the same situation as the Jews who have only one state. But even if that were the case, even if we say the Palestinians are a separate people, even if we were to say that they are the original native inhabitants of the land, which they're not, because they refuse to share the land with the Jews who also have an ancient historic right to the land and are the majority, they have lost any rights they may have had. You cannot set out on 4 wars of genocide against another people and think that you get all your marbles back and you play the game again. They lost their right to self-determination when they deny ours.
You know, it's interesting because it used to be that many of the Arab leaders would say they're not Palestinians, they're Southern Syrians, things like that. They're people who immigrated, moved to the Israeli area when the Jews started creating jobs there, and that's why they moved there.
But even, like I said, the Arabs weren't the first inhabitants, but they were there a long time. They've been there for 1,300 years. Now, it's true the Jews have been there for twice that amount of time, but it doesn't matter. Let's say that a people who's been in an area for 1,300 years and a people who's been in an area for 2,600 years both have rights in the land. But when one of those people doesn't accept that, when the problem with the Palestinians is they believe they have exclusive rights, and they deny Jewish history in the land, and they deny Jewish rights. And in so doing, they've undermined their own rights.
Well, they say they want the river to the sea, which means they want all the land, they want all the Jews dead. It's kind of a hard way to negotiate if they even want to. It's been my position that they shouldn't be negotiating any so-called two-state solution because it's a fraud. There's no possibility, but that's a subject that we've talked about many times before on the show. Let's take an email question. This is from Vanessa in Houston. She writes, do you think that there is an element of self-loathing in the American Jews who are hostile to Israel, and why is this? Do they feel guilty that they're they've profited from the good life in America?
There is an element of self-loathing, but it's not self-loathing of themselves as individuals or even as Jews. It's an element of self-loathing because their real religion is liberalism, is leftism, and they feel that Israel is not on the right side. They mistakenly feel that Israel is not on the right side of that of those issues, and therefore they need to go out of their way to apologize for Israel and her behavior because they think it doesn't fit into their woke belief system. So again, it's not self-loathing, but they have a different religion, and the real religion is wokeism, not Judaism.
But they don't really understand the history. That's my point.
No, it's sheer, as I said before, it's hollow, repeating hollow slogans which they think will win them popularity in the woke culture. It will, by the way, not win them anything, whereas the woke culture is very up in arms about so-called minority rights. It doesn't apply ever to the Jews on campuses. In the synagogue shooting in Texas, where they refused to acknowledge it was an anti-Semitic attack. So it's not winning them anything, but they are desperate to be accepted by the woke left, and that is the real motive, not self-loathing in and of itself.
I just wonder, why would they even want to be accepted?
Because that's their belief system. Their belief system is liberalism. It is not Judaism. They may be Jews on paper. They may have been born Jews and their birth certificate may say that, but their real belief system is liberalism, and everything flows from that.
I just would like to really understand how that occurred, but that's, again, beyond the subject of today's show.
That's a good subject for a whole show, yes.
Okay, let's move on. We've got just a minute or two before the next hard break. Let's see here. Does the antipathy towards Israel among left-wing American Jews worry Israelis? Do they even care about what the American Jews think?
Right. Now we're getting to kind of the point of what I want to say today, which is that the reality is most Israelis are unaware of the opinion of American Jews about Israel. They're certainly unconcerned with it. And the truth is, this is not an Israeli issue. It's not something you ever hear discussed in Israel among people or politicians. But it's a tragedy for American Jews. It's the American Jews who are lost and have forgotten who they are and need to find their real identity, not the Israeli Jews who are centered, who know who they are, and are proud of who they are. Because a culture like left-wing American Jewish culture that identifies with its enemies doesn't have a future.
Well, that's very interesting. And the things that you're talking about are certainly subject for thinking and discussion. We're going out in a lot of different areas here, but I think they're all very important and will have to be revisited at another time because each of the things you're bringing up should be explored further. We've got 2 minutes to go until the next break. Let's try to get another question in here. And again, if you call in with a decent question, you'll get a free copy of Devin's book, The Future of Israel. Next question, but doesn't Israel need the support of American Jews? What do you think about that?
In my opinion, it's the American Jews who need Israel far more than Israel needs them. So let me explain. Israel is not the struggling, weak little state struggling for existence that she once was, and maybe some people still imagine her to be.
1 minute, and then we can pick it up after the break.
All right. You let me know when we're getting...
You got another minute if you want.
I lived in Israel many years ago, and I do part of the year now again. I can barely describe to you the progress in every aspect of life in Israel. When I lived there, it was a bureaucratic socialist mess. The gross national product was $16 billion. Today, it's $400 billion. It's a modern, efficient, self-sufficient country today. You have high-speed trains going up and down the Mediterranean, highways, ultra-modern high-rises all along the beautiful Mediterranean coast.
Okay, Devin, let me stop you there. We'll pick it up after the break. You're listening to Middle East Radio Forum here on 960 The Patriot. My name is William Wolf. I'm your host today. Next Sunday will be Mayor Jolovitz. And I thank you for supporting the show and spreading the word about this show. Available everywhere in the world on my website, MiddleEastRadioForum.com. You can also listen to old shows in the podcast. And again, please continue to support my advertisers. Let them know that you're doing so because they advertise on this program. That is the lifeblood of this brokered show. Thanks for listening. We'll be right back after the break. Friends of the Israel Defense Forces offers educational, cultural, recreational, and social services that provide hope, purpose, and life-changing support for the soldiers who protect Israel. FIDF is the sole organization authorized to collect donations on behalf of the soldiers of the IDF. For more information or to make a donation, please visit fidf.org or call 323-843-2690. Watermark Wealth Strategies and Watermark Wealth Planning offices at 11333 North Scottsdale Road, Suite 295 in Scottsdale. Has been a loyal sponsor of this program since its start. They specialize in wealth retention, estate, and legacy planning. Watermark has been a leader in the Valley, and its members have been together for over 17 years. Founding partner Carmen Cercone has over 36 years of experience in tax, investment, and estate planning issues affecting retirees and their assets. They offer comprehensive planning that has helped assist families through the process of identifying client objectives and concerns and constructing a strategic plan to address tax, risk, and legacy issues. Consultations are complimentary, and we encourage you to contact Allison Porter at 480-442-3989 to schedule. Securities offered through Kestra Investment Services, LLC, member FINRA/SIPC. Investment advisory services offered through Kestra Advisory Services, LLC, an affiliate of Kestra Investment Services. Watermark Wealth Strategies, LLC, is not affiliated with Kestra Investment Services or Kestra Advisory Services. Maryland Deli and Mini Mart on the northwest corner of 7th Street in Maryland is much more than just a great Shell station and Mini Mart. Great cook-to-order food, different flavors of coffee and tea, beer and fine wine, including kosher wine, round out a wonderful one-stop shopping experience. A loyal sponsor of Middle East Radio Forum, check them out on the northwest corner of 7th Street in Maryland and Phoenix. That's Maryland Deli and Mini Mart, 602-277-6269. Have you been injured in an auto accident or on the job? At Complete Injury Management, we have decades of experience with auto accidents and work-related injuries. Call for valley-wide same-day treatment for chiropractic care, primary care, pain management, orthopedic surgery, counseling, and physical therapy. Our offices utilize the most advanced techniques to achieve optimal recovery. Call 602-497-4967 to get scheduled today. Find us on the web at www.cimarizona.com.
Are you vegetarian or vegan? Boy, do we have the restaurant for you. Veggie Village at 1255 East Northern in Phoenix, a terrific restaurant. Chicken, shrimp, calamari, mutton, and fish, all made from plants, a delight to your taste buds. This is a really exceptional restaurant. Closed on Sunday, but otherwise 6 days of terrific dishes. That's Veggie Village, 1255 East Northern, or call them at 602-944-1088.
You're listening to the Middle East Radio Forum on 960 The Patriot. To join in the conversation, call anytime at 602-508-0960. That's 602-508-0960. Outside of the Valley, call toll-free, 888-960-9696. Questions are also welcome at radioforum@aol.com. That's radioforum@aol.com. Now back to your host, Attorney William J. Wolf.
Welcome back to today's very interesting and important edition of Middle East Radio Forum. My name is William Wolf. My guest in studio is Devin Spear. Devin, you were talking about Israel is like today, the progress that you've noticed over the years that you've been familiar with it. I know I've got some questions by telephone and also by email, but I'll get to them as soon as you're finished with this answer.
Right. So the original question was, doesn't Israel need the support of American Jews? And I was explaining that Israel has progressed phenomenally. It's a beautiful country today, great climate, beautiful beaches. People come from all over Europe just to enjoy the country. The people are happy, healthy, beautiful. It took them a century and a half of tremendous sacrifice and labor, but the Israelis have built, as I said, a $400 billion economy. And they today have a higher per capita GDP than Japan, a higher per capita GDP than France or the UK. They have a warm Mediterranean climate, a naturally beautiful country, and have built a wonderful life for themselves. And considering the forces arrayed against them, their achievement is a miracle of biblical proportions.
Okay, we take some calls. Is that all right?
Sure, sure.
All right, let's first go to George from Phoenix. George, you're on the air.
Thank you. I want to remind everybody that most public schools, especially high school and colleges and universities, are elements of indoctrination. And I know Jewish people, they value education and school and college, but they're sending their children to be indoctrinated, in many cases against them.
All right, George, I do need a question. What's your question?
All right. My question is, do you agree that they're not educating their children, they're indoctrinating them and paying a lot of money to do it by the damn government?
Okay, George, thanks for the question. And if you want a copy of the book, come to my office, and it'll be there after about 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. Go ahead.
As a generalization, that's true on many college campuses. There is a lot of woke propaganda, and there are a lot of young Jews who, again, want to be part of that and therefore regurgitate it.
Okay, thanks for the question, George. Let's go to Gary in Mesa. Gary, you're on the air.
Yeah, wonderful show, and I wanted you to know how grateful I am for your program. My question is to address the apartheid issue. I understand that Israel conducted raids into Ethiopia to rescue Jews, or a Jewish sect of two. It was 1990, 1991.
It's still happening now, by the way, but go ahead.
It's still, I want to know if that was my question. Is that still going on, and what are you going to do to counter that nonsense about the apartheid state? Thank you very much.
Well, that's the sort of Palestinian propaganda that's not only untrue, it's the exact opposite of the truth. So, for example, you have 2 million Arabs who live in Israel. They have full civil rights. They are ministers in the government. They serve in the courts, in every aspect of Israeli society. On the other hand, in Palestinian areas, it's forbidden for a Jew to live. Or if he does live, he has to live under armed guard because they think he shouldn't be living there. So it's they who are preaching apartheid and not the Israelis, and yet they accuse you of doing the reverse. So they do that a lot. They stand the truth on their heads. They commit terrorism and they accuse Israel of committing terrorism when she defends herself. They destroy holy sites like they destroy the tomb of Joseph in the West Bank, and they accuse Israel of destroying holy sites, which of course she does not. So they often reverse truth.
Okay, yeah, and of course you're using the term West Bank because it's a common usage, but it's really
you're right.
Judea and Samaria, and we want to point that out because there is no such thing as the West Bank, unless you're talking about maybe some 10-foot wide strip along the Jordan River. Okay, Gary, if you want a copy of the book, you can come to my office and pick it up after about 10 o'clock tomorrow. We do have a email question I want to get to. This is from Jan in Sun City. She writes, incredibly, the target of the U.S. State Department's ire is not the murderer, but Israel for blowing up the convicted terrorist's house. The Biden administration did not issue condolences to the families of the victims or even condemn the terrorist actions. How do we fight this specifically with American Jews, but also Biden's administration? Where do we start to influence and educate? From Jan in Sun City.
Well, Jan is referring to an incident that happened a few months ago in which a American citizen of Palestinian origin had gone by a bus stop and simply shot and killed a bunch of people, including a yeshiva student. And the Biden administration offered no condolences to the victims. But when the Israelis went in and did a controlled demolition of his house, having removed people from it, they condemned Israel for that. And the only thing you can do about that is vote against the Biden administration and make sure and do everything you can as a citizen to make sure they're no longer in power.
Okay, thank you for that question, Jan in Sun City. You're listening to Middle East Radio Forum here on 960 The Patriot. My name is William Wolf. This is the third break in today's show. We have the longest segment coming up after the break. Again, I know I say this all the time, but it's so important. If we're going to have Middle East Radio Forum, I need my advertisers. So please continue to use their services and make sure you tell them you're doing so because they advertise on this program. Again, people have asked how they can support the show if they're unable to use the services of the advertisers. Direct donations are welcome. You can send me, William J. Wolf, a check at my office, 7301 North 16th Street, Suite 203, Phoenix 85020. The address again, 7301 North 16th Street, Suite 203, Phoenix, Arizona 85020. Please stay with us. We're right back for the longest segment of today's show with Devin Spear.
Colors flying through.
Document Solutions of the Valley offers one of the lowest prices for your printer cartridge needs. Aside from free delivery, we even offer free cleaning for your office or personal printers. Document Solutions is a locally owned and employer-operated company that has been servicing Arizona companies' needs for over 36 years. For more information or printer cartridge pricing, call 623-252-8282 and ask for Richard. Again, that's 623-252-8282 and get treated like family.
Maryland Deli and Mini Mart on the northwest corner of 7th Street in Maryland is much more than just a great Shell station and Mini Mart. Great cook-to-order food, different flavors of coffee and tea, beer and fine wine, including kosher wine, round out a wonderful one-stop shopping experience. A loyal sponsor of Middle East Radio Forum, check them out on the northwest corner of 7th Street in Maryland and Phoenix. That's Maryland Deli and Mini Mart, 602-277-6269. Cherry Blossom Noodle Cafe has terrific sushi, salads, rice and noodle dishes, soup, and even great pasta. On the northwest corner of 10th Street and Camelback, it will become your favorite Asian restaurant. A loyal sponsor of Middle East Radio Forum for more than 10 years, it is simply the best place for a great Asian lunch or dinner. That's Cherry Blossom Noodle Cafe on the northwest corner of 10th Street and Camelback. Tell them that William Wolf sent you there. Telephone 602-248-9090. Texas Grill on the northeast corner of Bethany Home Road and 16th Street has been my favorite steakhouse for 31 years. Great food, especially their chicken fried steak, as well as daily specials in a comfortable setting, keeps me coming back for more. You just have to try it for yourself. Also a great Sunday brunch starting at 10 in the morning. That's Texas Grill on the northeast corner of Bethany Home Road and 16th Street. Give them a try and you will have a new favorite steakhouse too. My name is William J. Wolf, host of Middle East Radio Forum since 2003. As you may know, I am a personal injury attorney in practice since 1971. I was just awarded the high honor of Trial Attorney of the Year by the Arizona Trial Lawyers Association. I handle all types of personal injury and wrongful death cases. Unlike many other attorneys, especially the high-volume TV advertising attorneys, I do go to court if necessary to obtain the best possible resolution for all my clients. It is often impossible to obtain the best possible result if your lawyer does not have the reputation of being willing to go to court on all matters. If you have a claim, please call me for a free initial consultation at 602-279-1914. My office is at 7301 North 16th Street, Suite 203 in Phoenix. Again, call 602-279-1914. I look forward to meeting you and making sure that you obtain the best possible recovery. Call 602-279-1914 and please continue to support Middle East Radio Forum.
You're listening to the Middle East Radio Forum on 960 The Patriot. To join in the conversation, call anytime at 602-508-0960. That's 602-508-0960. Outside of the Valley, call toll-free 888-960-9696. Questions are also welcome at radioforum@aol.com. That's radioforum@aol.com. Now back to your host, Attorney William J. Wolf.
Welcome back to the final segment of Middle East Radio Forum with my guest, Devin Spear. A very interesting, spirited conversation we're having here. And again, if you call in with a question, you'll get a free copy of his book, The Future of Israel. I do have an email question here from a very long-time listener. I think Alberto in the Netherlands has been listening to the show since its start. Alberto writes, does anyone look at the flag of Jordan and the flag of so-called Palestine? It's copied, just missing a detail, and I've been asking why did they copy the flag of Jordan?
Well, all I can say is that Jordan is made up of Palestinian population, Palestinian Arabs. There is no difference between the Arabs in Jordan and the Arabs in, say, Judea and Samaria or Gaza. So the whole construct of the Palestinian state needing a separate state from Jordan is a false construct.
Okay, again, thanks for that email, Alberto. All right, let's move on. Devin, don't Israelis have their own set of problems surrounded as they are by enemies seeking to destroy them?
First of all, it's no longer true that Israel is surrounded by enemies, as she once was. She now has normal relations with 6 Arab countries: United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Jordan, Egypt, Sudan, and Morocco. And these are not the fake Land for Peace Oslo Accords, but real warm peace of the Abraham Accords engineered by the Trump administration that feature bilateral trade, tourism, and economic cooperation.
Let me ask you a question, though. I never heard that the peace with Egypt is warm or the peace with Jordan is warm. It's just kind of a matter of convenience.
You're right. It's really the 4 countries, the 4 other countries that signed the Abraham Accords that have a warm peace. Jordan is a cold peace, and Egypt is a cold peace that's been getting warmer because there is actually military cooperation between Egypt and Israel, and there's, interestingly, military cooperation between Morocco and the UAE and Israel as well. They have common enemies in the Muslim Brotherhood and the Islamic fanatics, and on the one hand, and Iran on the other. So they actually do a lot of cooperation with Egypt, for example, in suppressing ISIS in Sinai, in suppressing Hamas in Gaza, and it's, I wouldn't call it warm, but it's a real good cooperation today. Now, she still faces threats, Israel, from Iran and her proxies, but this constant pressure that Israel has been under from the beginning has kept Israelis grounded and sharp. They don't have time for bad hair days, for contemplating their navels, or existential crisis over nothing. They take responsibility for themselves and each other. They live in the present, and they enjoy their life. Unlike here in the United States, where children are taught to judge their country and each other primarily through the lens of race and victimization, Israeli children from every country and background are brought together through love of their country and their land. Young Israelis know who they are and where they come from. They're raised to think for themselves, and they're extremely capable. And this strong sense of common community and this feeling of being part of something greater than themselves contrasts sharply with the tribalism that's being preached in the United States. And it's one of the primary reasons that polls invariably show Israelis among the happiest people in the world.
Okay, let's move on. Devin, why should American Jews attach themselves to Israel's cause? I mean, as I mentioned before, these friends of mine, Israel just doesn't enter their mind. It's just not part of their life or their thinking.
They should do it for their own sake, not for Israel's, because above all, those American Jews who turn their back on Israel or ignore Israel don't understand that they're depriving themselves of being part of this incredible success story. American Jews who identify with the cause of our enemies is no substitute for self-respect, national pride, and the sense of achievement that every Israeli shares.
Okay, so how should American Jews view Israel, in your opinion, and how do you educate them so they can understand what you're talking about?
Let me answer the question in 2 parts about education. Let's start with education. What we're doing here is education. Just visiting Israel is a great education. The Birthright program is a terrific program that I recommend to anyone who hasn't sent their kids on it. It's the best deal in the world: free airfare, free hotel, free tours around Israel. I never knew anyone who came back from it that wasn't transformed. How should American Jews view Israel? In my opinion, they should view it as their salvation, not as their problem, as some Jews on the left see it, as their salvation. Their lives would be so immeasurably enriched if they made Israel's cause their cause. Now, let's say that America continues, God forbid, on its current woke, self-destructive path. American Jews should take comfort in knowing that they don't have to follow everyone over that cliff. They can take comfort in knowing that we have a beautiful country, a Jewish state, one that wants them and will welcome them with open arms. Israel will embrace even the Jews who had never appreciated their tremendous sacrifice and achievements, even those who disparaged and unjustly condemned them. So American Jews have another home, someone that they can be proud of, that they can take part in, that they can volunteer for. If they're young, they can go join the army, even if they don't want to live there. They can visit, they can go on Birthright, they can take part of this amazing, beautiful, warm, sunny country, and they can make its cause their own. And I think it would be to their benefit, and they need it much more than the Israeli Jews need them.
Devin, it appears you like Israel.
I love Israel, and when I say love, sometimes you can love somebody or something and still see the flaws in it. And Israel is flawed. I don't want to give anyone the impression that there are not all kinds of problems in Israel. But what I can tell you is when I see my grandchildren who are growing up there, and the self-respect, the national pride in their school, in their friends, their patriotism, their comfort in their own skin, their knowledge of their history. They grow up learning Jewish holidays. It's organic to who they are, learning Judaism in their schools. I love to see that, and I think it's a very healthy environment, and it is a pity if American Jews don't partake in that, at least in some way, and there are many ways in which they can do that.
Okay, I have another caller from Scottsdale this time. Jock from Scottsdale, go ahead, you're on the air with Devin Spear.
Mr. Spear, following up on your last comments on the importance of Israel to educate American and Jews, are synagogues actively involved in trying to sell that idea to Jews in the United States that they need to, put a high priority on supporting Israel?
To some extent, but that's also divided on political lines. So Orthodox congregations more so because they are usually more right-wing politically. Some of the far left, usually Reform congregations, may even be hostile to Israel, and many of them maybe don't care. So yes, there are many programs where synagogues take congregants to Israel on trips, besides Birthright that I mentioned before, and those are all good things, but I don't think that synagogues are doing what they should be doing. What they should be doing is Israel should be the center of the Jewish world. And I submit to you that when we're reading history 100 years from now, Israel will be the center of Jewish history, and what's happening here will be a footnote, and American Jews need to understand that. What Jewish history is being written today in Israel. And the future of the Jewish people is dependent on what's happening in Israel. Not what happens in Black Lives Matter, and not what happens in any of these other causes they latch themselves onto. This is what matters. This is what is going to make or break the Jewish future. And they have the choice of being part of it or not. And if they choose not to be part of it, that's their loss.
Okay, Jock, thanks for your question. And again, if you want a copy of Devin's book, it'll be available in my office after 10 o'clock tomorrow. Let's try to get another question here, Devin. Do you think the increasing lawlessness and social disintegration in the United States will cause more American Jews to emigrate to Israel? I know in France, because of all the anti-Semitism, a lot of the French Jews are making Aliyah, which means going up and moving to Israel. Go ahead.
Well, let me start by telling you about the neighborhood I live in Netanya, Israel, which is a brand new neighborhood called Ir Yamim, City of the Sea. It's on a beautiful beach. It's brand new. It's all towers of between 20 and 35 floors. It looks kind of like Miami Beach. It's amazingly designed area, and I would say it's half immigrants from the West, half many Jews from France, many from South Africa, some from America, some British, some from Ethiopia, some from Russia, and these are new Russian immigrants, not the wave from the 70s. And most of them are living very well. It's a beautiful area. So there is a very large immigration to Israel, especially from Europe today. There are also more and more Jews from the United States immigrating. I can tell you that immigration from North America to Israel is up 42% in 2021 over the previous year. And that's during the year of COVID, when it was very difficult. The demand for housing is so great in Tel Aviv that Tel Aviv is today the most expensive real estate in the world. More expensive than Hong Kong, more expensive than Tokyo, more expensive than New York.
That's hardly a draw for people to move there. I mean, if it's that expensive.
That's a problem, although you don't have to move to Tel Aviv. You can move to other cities. Tel Aviv is just particularly hot. But yes, there are housing is expensive. You're going to sell a big house here and not live in such a big house there. There are sacrifices. But the upside is you're going to feel part of this thing greater than yourself. You're going to, as I walk in Ir Yamim and I go to the center on Hanukkah, there's an enormous menorah in the center of the shopping center. You feel Jewish history everywhere you go. Young people are great there. They volunteer for the combat units. They take pride in their country. They're patriotic. You don't have the sort of negativity against the country that you see among a lot of young people here today. And I think that's worth something. That's a nice feeling.
Okay, another question coming in from Scottsdale. Joan from Scottsdale, go ahead. You're on the air with Devin Spear.
Yeah, hi. Based on what Kevin said, Devin said, there is at least one rabbi in town here who supports J Street very strongly. And the Holocaust survivors, the children and grandchildren of Holocaust survivors, are basically on the left. And it's very frustrating because they don't want to hear anything that has to do with supporting Israel or that tells them that their thinking is somewhat wrong.
Well, I can...
how do you deal with that?
First of all, I can tell you that there are a lot of Holocaust survivors in Israel who are not on the left, who support Israel. There are whole kibbutzim and settlements and towns that have been supported, that have been founded by Holocaust survivors in Israel.
Yeah, excuse me, Devin. I'm not talking about Israel. I'm talking about here in Phoenix and Scottsdale.
Yes, I understand. I just wanted to say that to differentiate, there are Holocaust survivors there that have a different opinion. If someone has survived the Holocaust and he is not...
It's their children, not those survivors themselves.
I see. Well, hopefully we can send them on Birthright, which, as I said, I've never met anyone who went on Birthright and wasn't transformed by it, no matter what starting point they come from. That's a fantastic program. Just visiting Israel will have a great effect on people, especially young people. And, you know, it's the United States. There are rabbis who may preach, who may be for Jade Street, which is a very anti-Israeli Jewish organization, and we can't stop that from happening. But we can continue to tell the truth and educate them and hopefully bring them around to their own people. And I would say that it's natural for a human being to be proud of who they are. And the Jews have a great and an ancient history. And it's really sort of ludicrous, if you know anything about it, not to be proud of it. So simply educating people to Jewish history, to Israel as it really is, not as the left portrays it, but the wonderful place it is, that should have an effect on people, and that's all we can do.
Okay, Joan, thanks for the call. If you're going to come to my office for a copy of the book, call first because I may not have enough copies. I wasn't expecting this much interest. 602-279-1914. I can get extra copies of the book, but I want you to call first because I don't want you to make a trip and I don't have a copy because I know George and Gary are also going to get a copy and Jock also. Devin, give you about 30 seconds if there's something else you want to say.
We pretty much covered it. I just wanted to basically get across the point to summarize that it is the American Jews and not
please.
And not the Israelis who are losing out if they detach themselves. That Israel is not this poor, struggling country it once was, but a wonderful country which gets millions of tourists every year from Europe, not necessarily Jews, because it's such a great place. And if you haven't visited it, I urge you to do so. And I urge you to look at Israel as it is today and not as it's portrayed by its enemies.
Evan Spear, thank you very much. Tremendous presentation. Next Sunday, as I mentioned, Mayor Jolovitz returns. He's going to discuss why do the so-called Friends of Israel continue to accept the anti-Israel narrative that wrongly defines the Middle East conflict. Mayor is a tremendous host. Usually doesn't have a guest because he presents his own information, which is terrific because he's a scholar of this area. And I appreciate the fact that he takes a burden off me to take about half the shows. We normally alternate. He did the show last week, and he's going to do the show next week, and I appreciate that very much. I'd like to thank you for listening. Again, thank you very much for supporting the show by using the services of the advertisers let them know you're doing so because they advertise on this program. Very, very important. When the 19th year broadcasts, I'd like to continue. Thanks again and have a great day.